The sound of classical music and the laughter of Sao Paulo's high society faded behind me as the heavy service door slammed shut. Outside, the night was broken only by the thud of my boots on the dry ground and the rough pull of my own breath. My name was Emily Carter, and I was dragging 2 enormous black bags stuffed with the remains of the banquet taking place inside the mansion. Half-eaten lobster, crab shells, unfinished bottles of champagne. The rich threw away more in one evening than poor families dared to hope for in a month. My arms burned. I hated this shift. I hated serving Eleanor Whitmore while she raised a crystal glass and offered a carefully rehearsed smile in memory of her supposedly dead stepson. A tragic accident, she had told the cameras, dabbing at a tear that had never existed. 3 days had passed since the symbolic funeral. 3 days of false mourning and secret celebration. I reached the waste container, deliberately placed far from the mansion so the smell would not offend the guests' delicate noses. With a strained groan, I heaved the first bag over the edge. It landed with a dull crash that echoed into the darkness. I bent for the second bag, and froze. A sound. It was not the wind moving through the branches of the jabuticaba trees. It was not a night animal. I knew the countryside well enough to recognize the cautious steps of an opossum or the sudden beat of an owl's wings. This was different. It was wet, broken, human, a muffled groan shaped by unbearable pain. My hands tightened around the plastic bag. The yellow rubber gloves squeaked under my grip. My heart struck hard against my ribs. An intruder. The estate security was supposed to be impenetrable. If Eleanor caught me outside speaking to a stranger, she would dismiss me without hesitation. "Who's there?" I called. My voice trembled more than I wanted it to. I pulled an empty glass bottle from the bag. It was a pathetic weapon, but it was all I had. No one answered. Then came another strained rustle against the ground, followed by a dry cough, smothered, as if someone had clamped a hand over his own mouth to keep from making noise. The sound came from the far side of the old stone wall that marked the estate's original boundary. I took one step, then another. Fear and curiosity twisted together inside me. I moved along the wall, pressing my back to the cold, rough stone. I drew a deep breath, counted to 3, and sprang around the corner with the bottle raised. What I saw turned my blood to ice. The bottle slipped from my fingers. It hit the earth without breaking and rolled uselessly until it struck a worn leather boot. A man sat on the ground, slumped against the wall, or what was left of a man. His clothes hung in rags, covered with grey dust and dark stains that even in the poor light I recognized as dried blood. His head was bowed. Tangled hair, packed with dirt, hid most of his face. But it was not his terrible condition that made me press both hands over my mouth to smother a scream. It was what he was holding. His scraped and trembling arms formed an unbreakable cradle around 3 tiny bundles. 3 white blankets, now brown with earth and grime. Babies. Triplets. At the sound of the falling bottle, the man slowly lifted his head. The movement seemed to cost him everything. The muscles in his neck tightened. His jaw locked to keep a cry from escaping. When his eyes met mine, the ground seemed to disappear beneath my feet. Those eyes. Sharp green eyes, now bloodshot and ringed with purple from exhaustion. I knew them. I had seen them in the business magazines Eleanor left scattered around the mansion. I had seen them in the portraits that once hung in the main corridor, before she ordered every one of them removed. It was him. The dead heir. Mr. Samuel Whitmore, I whispered as my knees nearly gave way. I stumbled backward as though I had seen a ghost. He did not answer at first. His throat moved painfully when he swallowed. It looked as dry as desert sand. He pulled the infants closer to his chest with the instinctive, animal protectiveness of a hunted father. "Water," he rasped. His voice sounded like metal dragged over stone. "Please. My children." One of the bundles moved. A thin, piercing moan came from beneath the blanket. Samuel flinched and lowered his eyes at once. He rocked the baby with awkward, desperate movements. "Easy, easy. Daddy's here. Please don't cry," he whispered. A tear traced a clean line through the dirt on his cheek. "Please, little angels. Stay quiet." The contrast was so cruel that I felt dizzy. The wealthiest man in the region, the lawful owner of everything around us, was lying in the dirt like a beggar, terrified that his own babies might make a sound. I moved closer, forgetting rank, forgetting that I was a cleaner and he was the master of the estate. I dropped to my knees without caring that the dust would ruin my spotless uniform. "Mr. Whitmore, Everyone says you died, I said urgently. Your car went over the cliff. They found the wreckage. Mrs. Whitmore said there were no survivors. She held a funeral. A sound escaped him that was almost a laugh, though it resembled a dying man's breath. He looked toward the mansion, where golden light glowed beyond the trees. That is what she wanted. The hatred in his voice made me shiver. It wasn't an accident, Emily. She cut the brake lines. I looked at the babies. They were impossibly small, far too young to be outdoors. Their tiny faces were red and creased with hunger and discomfort. You've been out here with them for 3 days? I asked in horror. Half walked. Half crawled, he said, trying to shift his right leg. A spear of pain crossed his face. The leg lay at an unnatural angle inside his boot. I had to pull them out of the car before it exploded. Then I hid in the brush. If she learns we are alive, she'll finish what she started. The baby who had whimpered began to cry louder, a raw, desperate sound of hunger. Samuel went pale. He stared toward the mansion with eyes wild from fear. Quiet him, he begged. There was no anger in his voice, only terror. The guards patrol this area. If they hear... He did not finish. He did not need to. I finally understood the horror in his eyes. He was not afraid for himself. He was afraid for the 3 innocent lives in his arms. In that moment, I did not see a millionaire. I saw a father who would let himself be killed if it meant his children survived. The baby's cry cut through the still evening like an alarm. Samuel awkwardly pressed his dirty, shaking little finger to the child's mouth, offering something to suck on. But hunger was stronger than comfort. They're starving, he said. They've had nothing but rainwater. I caught it in my hands. His gaze locked onto mine. They will die, Emily. You have to help us. Better yet, take them. The request struck me like a slap. What are you saying? I asked, moving closer to examine the infants. They were cold. Much too cold. I can't go any farther. My leg is infected. I haven't felt it since yesterday. Only then did I notice the metallic, sweet smell rising from his torn trousers, mixed with sweat and soil. I'm dead weight, he continued. I can't run carrying them. Take them to the workers' village. Say they're yours. Say you found them near a church. I don't care. Just get them away before Eleanor finds them. Stop talking nonsense, I snapped. Something stronger than obedience had taken over, something close to a mother's instinct. I am not going to steal your children and leave you here for vultures, or for that woman's guards to finish what she began. Samuel caught my wrist. His grip was weak, but his fingernails dug through my uniform. You don't understand, he whispered, pulling his face closer to mine. Fever burned in his pupils. Eleanor owns everyone. She bought the medical examiner. No one is coming to save us. If we walk into their house and they see us, they won't call the police. They'll shoot us and bury us under the new swimming pool. His eyes dropped to the babies. These children are heirs. As long as they breathe, she owns nothing. Do you understand what that means? Dead, they are worth more to her than alive. I pulled my hand free, not from disgust but because I needed to act. I tore off my rubber gloves and touched one baby's forehead. He was burning with fever. Dehydration, I whispered. They need milk. They need warmth. And you need a hospital. My mind began racing. I looked toward the mansion. Through the windows of the great hall, the shadows of dancing guests moved beneath chandeliers. There's no time, Samuel insisted. His voice cracked. I heard the guards' motorcycles in the northern section. They're closing the circle. They know a wounded man carrying 3 newborns can't move quickly. He shoved the babies toward me with what little strength remained. Please, Emily. Have mercy. Save them. Then an engine sounded nearby. Very nearby. An all-terrain vehicle approached along the dirt road curving around the wall. Headlights swept across the crowns of the trees above us. Samuel flattened himself against the stone. He covered the infants with his own body, curling into a human shield. He stopped breathing. I crouched beside him. The vehicle stopped less than 50 yards away. I heard the rough voice of Marcus Reed, the head of security, a huge man with scars across his knuckles and absolute loyalty to Eleanor's money. Nothing here. Just garbage. Perimeter is clear, Marcus said into his radio. Static crackled. Then another voice replied, too faint for us to recognize. Marcus answered, yes, I understand. She wants every hole checked.
No surprises.
We'll dismount and search behind the old walls on foot. Samuel opened his eyes and looked at me. It was a farewell. He was preparing to stand and draw them away so I could run with the babies in the opposite direction. I saw him brace his palms against the ground, ready for the pain, ready to sacrifice himself. Don't move, I ordered in a fierce whisper. My mind connected the pieces. Marcus was coming on foot. In 2 minutes he would round the wall, see Samuel, see the babies, and kill them on the spot. There was no time to run into the forest. With Samuel's broken leg and 3 newborns, they would catch us in seconds. The only way out was not to flee from the mansion. It was to go inside. I looked at the garbage bags I had brought. Then I looked at the enormous laundry cart I had left near the service door, partly hidden behind bushes 10 yards away. It was a deep grey canvas container on reinforced wheels, used to haul tablecloths, uniforms, and wine-soaked linens after large events. The laundry cart, I muttered. Samuel stared at me through the fog of pain. What? The outside laundry company collects the dirty linens in 15 minutes. Their carts pass through the service entrance without inspection. The guards never search them. They think the laundry is disgusting. I turned to Samuel and gripped his shoulders with enough force to surprise him. You are not staying here to die, Mr. Whitmore. And I am not running through the woods like a fugitive with 3 starving babies. We are going into your house. His expression turned blank. Through the front. Eventually. First, we have to become garbage. You're insane, he whispered. But a spark of hope appeared in his ruined gaze. Yes, I said. And you're desperate. That makes us a good team. Marcus's boots grew louder over the dry leaves. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Can you crawl 3 yards? I asked, pointing toward the laundry cart. Samuel clenched his jaw and looked at the exhausted babies in his arms. For them, I would crawl through hell. Good, I said. Because that's exactly what we're about to do. We are dragging hell into Eleanor Whitmore's party. I rose, brushed the dust from my apron, and forced myself into the posture of a submissive servant. My hands were no longer shaking. I was furious. An enraged mother, even one protecting children who were not hers, was more dangerous than an army. I ran to the cart and rolled it toward him. Its wheels squealed just as the beam of Marcus's flashlight began to cut through the darkness. Now or never. While death breathed down our necks outside, life inside the mansion was being celebrated with a cruelty that chilled the blood. The stone walls of the great house kept out more than cold. They kept out compassion. Crystal glasses rang in the ballroom. Eleanor Whitmore stood beside the fireplace with champagne in one hand, watching the guests with a smile that never touched her eyes. There was no grief in her posture. Her spine was straight and tense, like a wire pulled too tightly. This champagne tastes like vinegar, she suddenly shouted. She held the glass at the nearest wall. Crystal exploded into 1,000 fragments. Foam spilled across an antique tapestry. The ballroom fell silent. The string quartet stopped in the middle of a note. A young waiter approached with a tray, shaking as he knelt to gather the glass. Eleanor looked at him as if he were an insect she had stepped on. Get that out of my sight and bring another bottle from Samuel's private collection, she ordered, speaking her stepson's name with a mixture of mockery and triumph. After all, he will no longer need it. The family attorney, Harold Bennett, slid close to her through the guests. He was a short, oily man with the eyes of a rodent. Mrs. Whitmore, he whispered, please show some restraint. The company's partners are here. It has only been 3 days since the accident. Accident. Eleanor gave a dry, joyless laugh. She turned toward him with enough venom to make him step backward. Call things what they are, Bennett. His car burned so thoroughly that there weren't even teeth left to identify. She lowered her voice and gripped the lapels of his jacket. Did you bring the papers? They are in the study. Transfer of control over the estate. Since the triplets are also presumed dead, you are the only heir. But we still need the notary's signature. He arrives in less than an hour. Good, she said. Tonight I erase every trace of those little parasites from this house. Her eyes moved to the enormous family portrait above the ballroom, where Samuel smiled while holding his newborn children. She summoned the household manager with one sharp gesture. "I want that painting gone. Burn it, throw it away, I do not care. If I see his face, or those infants, on my walls again, you will be put out on the street with them." While she drank icy champagne, her stepson was outside swallowing dirt and fighting for every second of life. Marcus's flashlight cut through the night like a knife. It passed over the trunks of the jabuticaba trees less than 20 yards away. His boots crushed the dead grass in a steady rhythm. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Every step was a countdown. "Move," I whispered, rolling the laundry cart into the deepest shadow beside the wall. Samuel stared at me through a haze. The pain on his face was so severe that he looked like a wax mask melting in heat. He pushed against the ground, but his broken leg hung uselessly beneath him. "I can't," he groaned through clenched teeth. Cold sweat ran down his forehead, mixing with dried blood. There was no time for gentleness, and no room left for the distance between master and servant. I bent, grabbed the torn collar of his jacket, and dragged his face close to mine. "You are a father," I growled. "You do not have the right to surrender." The reminder awakened something primitive in him. Samuel released a muffled roar, a mixture of rage and agony, and found strength he should not have possessed. He pushed upward while I pulled, sliding my arms beneath his shoulders and ignoring the smell of infection. Together, we dragged him to the edge of the canvas cart. "The children first," he muttered, refusing to climb in until they were safe. With trembling but careful hands, I lifted the first baby. He weighed almost nothing, like an injured bird. I laid him on the bottom of the cart atop a pile of damp towels that smelled of sour wine and sauce. Then I took the second baby. Then the third. I made a nest in one corner using the softest cloth I could find among the dirty linens. "Now you," I ordered. Samuel gripped the metal edge of the cart until his knuckles turned white. With a monumental effort, he lifted his upper body and collapsed inside. The impact tore a cry from him. I smothered it by pressing my palm over his mouth. "Quiet. For God's sake, be quiet," I begged into his ear. His hot tears wet my hand. His broken leg had struck the side of the cart. The pain must have been blinding. "I'm sorry," he whispered deliriously, curling around the 3 babies to protect them with his body. "Don't let them find us, Emily. Don't let them reach my children." The flashlight beam lit the corner of the wall 3 yards away. I began throwing dirty towels, stained waiter uniforms, and greasy sheets over them. I covered Samuel's head, the infants' bodies, everything. I buried them beneath the filth of Eleanor's celebration. "Do not move. Do not breathe loudly. If you make a sound, we die," I whispered into the mound. I turned just as Marcus stepped around the corner with one hand resting on his pistol. His flashlight struck me directly in the face. "Stop," he barked. "Who's there?" I raised my hands and shielded my eyes. My heart hammered so hard I feared he could hear it. "It's me, Mr. Reed, Emily." I shouted, forcing irritation into my voice to hide the panic. "You almost blinded me with that thing." Marcus lowered the flashlight slightly. The beam moved from my chest to the enormous cart beside me. He approached slowly, carrying himself with the borrowed authority his uniform gave him. "What are you doing out here, Emily? The party is inside. No staff are allowed near the perimeter. And who do you think takes out the party's garbage?" I shot back, planting my hands on my hips. By some miracle, my voice sounded firm. "The laundry truck arrives in 10 minutes. I have to get this to the service entrance or the manager will deduct it from my pay. Look how full it is. These guests eat and drink like pigs." Marcus walked around the cart, inspecting it. Then he kicked one wheel. The cart rocked violently. I stopped breathing. "Please don't cry. Please, Samuel, don't scream." From deep inside the pile came a faint crackle, like a twig snapping or a bone shifting. Marcus froze and tilted his head. What was that? His hand moved toward his weapon. Terror turned my veins to ice. I had 1 second to invent something. What was what? I asked with a nervous laugh. "Oh, the rats. This place has been crawling with them since the pest control budget was cut. I saw one the size of a cat between the bags last week. That's why I want to move quickly, Mr. Reed. I don't want one climbing up my leg." Marcus wrinkled his nose in disgust. "Filthy creatures," he muttered. He relaxed slightly, but he did not step away. Instead, he reached toward the cart and lifted the edge of a sheet soaked in red wine. In the darkness, it looked like blood. "It stinks." "Food, wine, and drunken vomit," I said. "Would you like to inspect it?" I grabbed a napkin soaked in dark sauce and held it toward him. "Here, help me sort it if you're so interested." Marcus recoiled, waving one hand in front of his face. "Get that away from me. Leave. Now. If I catch you wandering out here again, I'll tell Mrs. Whitmore you were stealing silverware." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." I seized the handle. The cart weighed almost a ton. Samuel and the babies added nearly 200 pounds to the wet linen. I pushed with my entire body, driving my boots into the dirt. The wheels squealed in protest. I advanced one step at a time, feeling Marcus's stare fixed between my shoulder blades. Every yard was fire. "Don't cough. Don't cry." Just as I reached the turn toward the service entrance, Marcus's radio burst into static. "Read. Come to the ballroom. Mrs. Whitmore is losing patience. A waiter dropped a tray, and she wants someone to teach him manners. Over." "Understood. On my way." His footsteps hurried toward the main entrance. I released the breath I had held until my chest hurt. My legs shook so badly that I had to lean against the cart to stay upright. "He's gone," I whispered through tears. "Hold on, Mr. Whitmore. We are almost inside." No answer came from the cart. Only silence. Heavy, terrifying silence. I pushed with renewed urgency toward the service ramp. Once inside the fluorescent light of the kitchen corridor, I quickly pulled back the first layer of linens. Samuel's face was grey, almost blue. His eyes were closed. His head hung to one side. The babies rested on his chest, but he did not move. "Mr. Whitmore." I shook him carefully. Nothing. He had lost consciousness from pain, or something worse. I looked at the kitchen clock. 5 minutes remained before Eleanor was expected to sign the papers. I had a dying man and 3 lawful heirs hidden in a laundry cart in the middle of a kitchen full of chefs shouting orders for a banquet. One cook turned and noticed me standing there, pale and sweating. "Emily, why are you blocking the corridor?" shouted the head chef, a thick-set nervous man. "Move that rubbish. We need room for dessert." "Yes, chef. Right away." I lowered my head and covered Samuel again. My plan to get inside had worked. Now I was trapped in the wolf's mouth. If Samuel did not wake, if he could not speak, I would look like nothing more than a murderer pushing corpses through the mansion. I needed to reach the ballroom. I needed to cross the entire service wing, past the inner guards, and interrupt the ceremony before the notary put a pen into Eleanor's hand. And I had to do it alone. I pushed the cart toward the swinging doors that led into the guest corridor. The real danger had only begun. The service corridor was a cauldron of controlled chaos, a separate world from the silent luxury of the ballroom. The air smelled of truffle sauce, roasting meat, and the sour sweat of 50 employees running for their professional lives. I pushed the cart with white knuckles, feeling Samuel and the children drag against my shoulders as though I were hauling a mountain. "Watch it, idiot!" a waiter shouted as he rushed past with a tray of empty crystal glasses. We nearly collided. The cart lurched dangerously. One front wheel, already damaged in the garden, released a metallic shriek that sounded like a gunshot to me. "Sorry. Laundry," I muttered, lowering my head and trying to become invisible. No one paid attention. To them, I was furniture, a shadow in yellow gloves. But I knew what I carried. The fate of an entire family lay beneath wine-stained tablecloths and dirty napkins. I reached a narrow side alcove between the refrigerated pantry and the wine cellar, where brooms and cleaning supplies were stored. It was the only place without cameras. I needed one moment. I had to know whether the man I was dragging was still alive. I shoved the cart into the storage room and closed the door. Darkness enclosed me, broken only by the strip of light beneath the frame. My hands shook uncontrollably as I tore away the layers of filthy linen. "Mr. Whitmore," I whispered, lifting a damp towel from his face. What I saw stopped my heart. His skin was grey. His lips had turned blue. His eyes moved rapidly beneath their closed lids. He was burning with fever. The infection in his leg was spreading through his blood faster than either of us had understood.
No.
Don't die now. Don't do this to me. I lightly slapped his cheek, smearing his skin with my sweat. Wake up. The infants, by some miracle, remained asleep against their father's fevered warmth. Exhaustion and hunger had drugged them into silence. They were so small, so fragile. If Samuel died in that broom closet, I had no way to save them. Eleanor would destroy us all. Samuel gave a deep groan and suddenly opened his eyes. At first he did not recognize me. His pupils were enormous, nearly swallowing the green of his irises. He caught my wrist with startling force. The brakes. Eleanor, no, he gasped, trying to rise as he relived the crash. It's me. Emily. We are inside. In the kitchen, I said, holding his shoulders so he would not overturn the cart. We are safe for the moment. He blinked. Reality slowly entered his fevered mind. He looked at the babies in his lap and counted them with his eyes. 1, 2, 3. Then he collapsed back against the linen, releasing a breath that smelled of illness. The kitchen, he muttered. What time is it, Emily? I need the time. I checked my cheap plastic wristwatch. 9:15. His reaction was immediate. Panic transformed his face and gave him energy he should not have had. He tried to climb from the cart, but his legs refused him. Too late. It may already be too late. He clutched his chest and struggled for air. At 9:30, the notary will certify my legal death. I know, I said. They're going to transfer the inheritance. That's why we came inside. It isn't only the inheritance, he cut in. His bloodshot eyes fixed on me with terrifying intensity. Listen carefully. My father's trust contains a clause. If I die without legally recognized heirs, ownership of the land passes automatically to a foreign holding company. A violent cough shook him. He covered his mouth to keep quiet. When he pulled his hand away, fresh blood stained his palm. Eleanor keeps the mansion, he continued rapidly, but she has already sold everything else. The plantation, the Jabuticaba groves, the workers' homes. She sold the land to an industrial development company. He struggled to breathe. If those papers are signed tonight, bulldozers arrive at 10. By morning, they will tear down everything. Your home, the village, the cemetery where my mother is buried. All of it. The revelation struck me in the stomach. This was not only a battle over a rich man's fortune. It was my home. My parents' home. My neighbors' lives. Eleanor did not want to rule the estate. She wanted to cash the final check and set the kingdom on fire. That woman is the devil, I whispered. Worse, Samuel said, closing his eyes against the pain in his leg. She needs us dead to collect the corporate life insurance policies. Those millions are her final payment. He looked at me again, and I saw helpless tears rolling through the grime on his face. I can't walk, Emily. I can't feel my legs. I'm finished. You have to go into the ballroom. Shout. Tell them I'm here. Stop the signing. I shook my head. Who will believe me? I'm a cleaner. If I burst in screaming, Marcus will throw me outside before I finish one sentence. They'll say I'm drunk or insane. No one listens to people at the bottom. Then we are dead, he whispered, letting his head fall back in defeat. Silence filled the broom closet, thick and suffocating. Through the walls, I heard the orchestra playing a cheerful melody that seemed to mock us. I looked down at my hands. One still wore a yellow glove. Working hands. Hands that had scrubbed these floors for 10 years. I knew every crack, every corridor, every secret in this mansion. And now those hands held the most valuable garbage in the world. A cold anger began rising through my throat, different from fear. No, I said. My voice sounded unfamiliar. Hard. Samuel opened one eye. I'm not going alone, I said as I carefully covered him again, leaving a narrow opening so he could breathe. We are all entering that ballroom. You, me, and the babies. Emily, I can't walk, he protested weakly. You don't need to walk. You only need to stay alive. I'll be your legs. I will push this cart into hell itself if I have to. But you must promise me one thing. I brought my face within inches of his, ignoring every social boundary that had once divided us. When I open those doors, When I overturn this cart in the middle of their elegant celebration, you have to stand. Even if it is only once. Even if it is the last thing you ever do. You must stand and look that witch in the eyes. Can you do that?" Samuel stuttered me. He saw that I was not asking permission. I was giving an order. He swallowed, nodded slowly, and found my hand beneath the linen. "I'll do it," he swore. "Even if every bone left in my body breaks." "Good." I straightened my apron and pulled on the second glove. "Then let's ruin her party." I stepped out of the storage room and drove the cart forward with new fury. I no longer tried to hide. I no longer tried to become invisible. I became a locomotive. My boots struck the tiled floor with relentless determination. The corridor linking the kitchen to the ballroom was long and lined with Persian rugs. They muffled the wheels, but they also made the cart harder to move. The load was crushing. My arms burned. My lungs demanded air. But adrenaline was stronger than pain. "Hey, you!" A sharp voice stopped me only a few yards from the enormous double oak doors leading to the main foyer. Mrs. Grayson, the housekeeper, stood in the middle of the corridor. She was a bitter woman who had served Eleanor with the loyalty of a prison guard. Her severe black dress was spotless, and a ring of keys hung from her waist like chains. "Where do you think you're going with that, Emily?" she demanded, folding her arms. "The service exit is in the other direction. You're dirtying the carpet." "I have direct instructions," I said without blinking, pushing the cart toward her and hoping she would move. She did not. Instead, she placed one hand on the edge of the cart and stopped it. "Instructions from whom?" "Mrs. Whitmore ordered all staff out of this corridor, especially anyone dragging a cart that smells like death." She leaned closer, narrowing her suspicious eyes. "What are you carrying?" My heart stopped. If she lifted the sheet, everything would end. She would scream. Marcus would come running. "A dead animal," I improvised. "We found it near the garden." I countered on her disgust. "A stray dog. The chef told me to remove it this way so the guests wouldn't see it through the kitchen windows." Mrs. Grayson stepped back in horror, but her devotion to rules was stronger than her revulsion. "That's a lie. The chef would never allow such a thing. Open it. I want to see." Her hand reached toward the sheet covering Samuel's face. I did not think. I released the cart with one hand, seized Mrs. Grayson's wrist before she could touch the cloth, and jerked her toward me. Her eyes widened. In 30 years, no servant had dared lay a hand on her. "Listen to me, you old witch," I whispered, bringing my face within inches of hers and releasing every ounce of rage stored through years of humiliation. "If you touch this cart, I swear on my mother's memory that I will tear out your eyes. You have no idea what is happening tonight. But if you stand in my way, you will sink with Eleanor." I shoved her backward. She stumbled over her heels and fell into a chair, gasping like a fish on dry land, too shocked to cry out. "Try following me," I warned. Then I seized the cart and ran. Noise no longer mattered. Nothing mattered except reaching those doors. As I approached the ballroom, Eleanor's amplified voice carried through the wood. "Although the loss of my dear stepson is beyond measure," she was saying in the sweet, false tone she practiced before mirrors, "we must look toward the future, a brighter future for this land. And so, before all of you, I intend to sign this binding agreement." I looked down at the cart. I imagined Samuel inside it, grinding his teeth against the pane, preparing himself. I pictured the 3 innocent babies sleeping against the chest of their dying father. I filled my lungs with courage. "Hold on, sir," I whispered. I stepped back twice, gathered speed, and rammed the doors with my whole body and the cart's momentum. The crash was magnificent. Both doors flew open and slammed against the walls like thunder. The laundry cart burst into the ballroom, rolling across polished marble until it stopped in the center of the dance floor beneath the enormous crystal chandelier. The orchestra died in the middle of a note. Conversations vanished. Hundreds of heads turned at once. Eleanor stood on a raised platform with a gold pen in her hand, ready to sign the document held by the notary. Her mouth fell open as she stared at the mountain of dirty linen that had invaded her moment of triumph. I entered behind the cart, gasping for breath. My hair had come loose, and my uniform was stained with earth and dried blood. I stood beside the cart alone against an entire world. Hundreds of eyes regarded me with contempt, confusion, and disgust. What is the meaning of this? Eleanor shrieked. Her voice tore through the tense silence. She hurried down the steps from the platform, her face twisted with rage. Security! Remove this lunatic. Marcus! Marcus appeared from a side door and charged toward me with one hand reaching for his weapon. Nobody move. I shouted. My voice filled the room with an authority I had never known I possessed. I raised one hand and pointed directly at Eleanor. That woman is a murderer. A murmur moved through the crowd like the buzzing of a giant hive. Get her out. Eleanor screamed, losing control. She is drunk. Throw her into the street. Marcus was less than 15 feet away. There was no time left. I looked at the cart. The moment had come. Come out, Mr. Whitmore. I shouted with all the strength in my lungs. Let her see you. Let everyone see what she did. I grabbed the edge of the cart and overturned it. The mound of dirty laundry spilled across the flawless marble, towels, stained uniforms, ruined sheets. And in the center of it all, emerging from the refuse, was Samuel Whitmore. He struck the floor with a heavy thud, still shielding the babies in his arms. The ballroom silence became absolute emptiness. No one breathed. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, Samuel moved. A groan escaped him and carried to the farthest corner of the hall. He planted one blooded hand against the white marble, leaving a vivid red mark, a signature of life across the purity of death. Then he raised his head. His face was covered with dirt, blood, and sweat. His green eyes burned with a terrible light. The gold pen slipped from Eleanor's fingers. Its tiny metallic strike against the floor was the only sound in the room. Her face turned ash-gray. She staggered backward into the notary, shaking her head as if she had seen the devil. Impossible, she whispered. The microphone clipped to her dress amplified her terror for everyone to hear. Samuel braced one arm beneath himself. Breathing was difficult, but he had made me a promise. He rose first onto one knee, then the other, dragging his broken leg behind him. He stood swaying, a ghost pulled from the grave, pressing the three heirs, whom the world had already declared dead, against his chest. The babies woke from the impact and began to cry. The sound of life. 3 powerful cries shattered the spell over the room. Samuel looked directly at his stepmother. He did not shout. He did not need to. His weak, broken voice cut through the air like a judge's sentence. Do not sign anything, Eleanor. Every word was a nail in her coffin. I am not dead. The echo of Samuel's voice moved through the silk-lined hall. But the silence that followed was even louder. It was thick and heavy, like the air before a hurricane. The guests, dark suits and designer gowns, formed a ring of horrified statues around the nightmare that had invaded their elegant party. Across the spotless marble, mud and blood spread beneath Samuel's knees. He shook violently. Standing had consumed the last of his strength. Only the will of a father kept him upright, the knowledge that if he collapsed, his children might die. The triplets cried with heartbreaking force. Their tiny lungs proclaimed the truth Eleanor had tried to bury. Eleanor recovered first. Her mind, trained by years of manipulation and cruelty, searched desperately for an escape. She could not deny what everyone saw. Not in front of the investors. Not in front of Arthur Whitaker, the elderly notary who held her future in his hands. Security, she screamed again. This time her voice cracked, shrill with panic. Remove that vagrant. He is an imposter. She rushed down the final steps, nearly tangling herself in her own expensive gown. Her accusing finger trembled like a leaf. Look at him, she shouted, spinning toward the guests and searching for allies with wild eyes. Do you truly believe that filthy animal is my stepson? Samuel died. We buried him. This is some grotesque performance, an actor hired by our competitors to destroy the transaction. Marcus forced his way through the crowd, shoving aside a waiter. His face had become a mask of contained rage. He understood that his own freedom was at stake. If Samuel described the sabotage breaks, Marcus could spend the rest of his life in prison. Back! Marcus roared. With a metallic snap, he extended a telescopic baton. The sound chilled the room. On the floor. Nobody move. I stepped between him and Samuel. My cleaner's uniform was stained with sauce, oil, soil, and blood. My hair hung across my face. Yet I had never felt stronger. I snatched a champagne bottle from the nearest table and smashed it against the edge. I held the jagged neck like a knife. "Take one more step and I'll open your throat, Marcus," I shouted. This was not the voice of a housemaid lowering her eyes. It was the voice of a lioness guarding her pride. "Touch him, and I swear I will kill you here." The guests gasped as one. High society was not accustomed to seeing a servant armed and unafraid. "She's insane." Eleanor screamed, clutching Marcus's arm. "Shoot her. They are dangerous. Protect the guests." Marcus hesitated. He looked at the hundreds of witnesses. He looked at the phones already raised to record the scene. He could not shoot an unarmed woman and a wounded father carrying newborns in front of the city's elite, not without consequences. But Eleanor leaned toward his ear. "Do it," she hissed. "I will pay double. Triple. Get them out of here and finish what we started." From the floor, Samuel lifted his head. Blood dripped from his nose onto the baby's white blanket. "I am not an actor," he rasped. He looked directly at Arthur Whitaker, the old and respected notary who had served Samuel's father. "Mr. Whitaker, look at me. It's Samuel." The notary lowered his glasses. His face was pale as paper. He took one uncertain step forward despite Eleanor shouting. "Do not go near him," she ordered, blocking his path. "He reeks of alcohol. He's a drunk they picked up from the street." Samuel raised one shaking hand and pushed the filthy hair away from his forehead. Above his left eyebrow was an old crescent-shaped scar, a childhood injury from a horse at the age of 10. "You gave me my first fountain pen," Samuel whispered, locking eyes with the old man. "You drafted my father's will in this room." Arthur Whitaker froze. A wine glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered nearby. "Dear God," the notary murmured, pressing one hand to his chest. "It is him." The confirmation fell like a bomb. Whispers became a roar. "He's alive." "That is Samuel Whitmore. Call an ambulance." Eleanor watched her house of cards collapse in real time. Denial no longer worked. Only violence remained. Her grieving widow mask vanished, revealing the hatred she had hidden for years. "I don't care who he is," she shouted, completely losing control. "This is my house. I am the lawful owner until proven otherwise. Marcus, remove this trash from my property immediately. This is trespassing." Seeing no other way out, Marcus lunged toward us. He did not draw his pistol, but he raised the baton with clear intent to break bones. "Watch out." I cried. I did not calculate. I moved. Marcus swung the baton at Samuel's head, a killing blow meant to silence him forever. My body was faster than his hatred. I threw myself over Samuel and the babies, covering them with my back. The baton came down with brutal force across my right shoulder. A dry crack stole the air from my lungs. White pain flashed through my spine and exploded behind my eyes. I did not scream. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, unwilling to frighten the babies more. I collapsed over them, becoming a living shield of flesh and bone. "Emily!" Samuel cried, trying to cover me with his weakened arms. Marcus raised the baton again, blinded by rage and fear. "Enough!" A thunderous voice stopped the second blow in midair. It did not belong to the police. It belonged to Henry Blackwood, the region's largest investor, a broad 70-year-old man known for ruthless business instincts and an uncompromising sense of fairness. He stepped from the crowd and caught Marcus's wrist with surprising strength. "Have you lost your mind?" Henry roared, shoving the guard backward. "You are beating a woman and children." Marcus stumbled and looked around. The spell of fear had broken. Other men among the guests, who moments earlier had been sipping champagne, stepped forward. They formed a protective wall between us and Eleanor's security. Basic decency finally defeated social cowardice. "Call the police," the mayor's wife shouted from the back of the room. "And find a doctor. They are dying." Eleanor realized that she was losing physical control of the ballroom. She ran toward the table where the sale documents waited. Her fingers clawed for the golden pen. "The signature," she muttered to herself in a state of madness. "If I date it yesterday, it will still be valid. If I sign it, everything is mine." Arthur Whitaker moved with speed that contradicted his age. He covered the documents with both hands and pulled them away. "You will not touch these papers, Mrs. Whitmore," he said sharply. "The heir is alive. The entire proceeding is suspended immediately." "Sign them, you old fool," Eleanor howled. She struck him across the face. The slap sounded weak and desperate. She tried to tear the documents from his hands and ripped one page down the middle. Meanwhile, the struggle for Samuel's life continued on the floor. I pushed myself upright. My shoulder pulsed with such violent pain that the room spun. Samuel had lost consciousness again. His eyes rolled beneath half-closed lids. Mr. Whitmore. I shook him. His skin burned under my fingers. His leg, a woman said as she knelt beside us. She was a physician invited to the party. She tore open Samuel's trouser leg and exposed the wound. The smell of infection struck the nearest guests and forced them backward. Samuel's leg was a map of horror, blackened, swollen, with red lines climbing toward his groin. My God, the doctor whispered. He has advanced sepsis. He needs a hospital now. Without treatment, he may die within an hour. No. Samuel's cry startled everyone. His eyes opened, fighting unconsciousness. Don't take me away. My children. Eleanor will kill them. He clutched the infants so tightly that his hands turned white. Even at the edge of death, his instinct as a father was stronger than the infection consuming his blood. No one will touch your children, I said, stroking his damp forehead and openly weeping. They are with me. I will protect them. Defeated by the notary and surrounded by the condemning faces of her own guests, Eleanor suffered one final spasm of pure hatred. She understood that everything was gone, the money, the estate, the reputation. If she could not have it, no one would. Her gaze fell on one of the large decorative candles near the platform. In one swift movement, she grabbed the heavy silver candelabrum. If it isn't mine, it will belong to no one, she screamed. She did not run toward the exit. She ran toward us. The crowd parted with cries of alarm. Eleanor raised the silver stand above her head, preparing to crush Samuel and his children in one final act of madness. Look out! Henry shouted. I was closer. The pain in my shoulder vanished beneath a surge of cold adrenaline. I did not stand. From the floor, I twisted and drove the heel of my work boot into Eleanor's knee. The crack was sickening. She screamed and fell face first onto the marble. The candelabrum flew from her hands and clattered across the floor. She tried to crawl away, but I was already on her. I forgot I was a servant. I forgot all the years of silence. I seized her perfect hair, pulled her head back, and forced her to look into my eyes. Touch one hair on those children's heads, I growled into her face, and I will kill you with my own hands. For the first time in her life, Eleanor Whitmore looked truly afraid. Afraid of me. Afraid of a nobody. Afraid of the cleaner she had never bothered to see. Let go of me, you filthy, she spat, but she had no air left to finish. It's over, I said. I pushed her flat against the floor and pinned her with one knee between her shoulders. Then sirens filled the night. Blue and red light flashed through the tall ballroom windows. The police had arrived. I turned towards Samuel. The doctor checked his pulse, her face tight with alarm. The mayor's wife held the babies and rocked them gently while they cried. They're here, I whispered to Samuel, unsure whether he could hear me. The good people are here now. Samuel turned his head slightly toward me. A faint smile appeared on his cracked lips. Thank you. Mom, he whispered. Perhaps he was confusing the past with the present. Or perhaps, in that moment, he was giving me the title I had earned through blood, sweat, and courage. His eyes closed. The hand reaching for mine fell limp against the cold marble. Code red, the doctor shouted. We are losing him. Give me room. Chaos erupted again. But this time it was the chaos of rescue. Paramedics rushed in with a stretcher, pushing millionaire guests aside as obstacles. Medical bags opened. Orders flew across the room. I remained on my knees, my uniform soaked with his blood and mine, watching them carry away the man I had somehow learned to love during a single night of terror. Marcus disappeared through a rear door, fleeing like the rat he was. Eleanor screamed with rage while two investors restrained her until the officers reached the ballroom. I looked at my hands. Slowly, I removed the last yellow rubber glove. It was torn and black with filth. I dropped it onto the ripped sale agreement. The cleaning was finished. Now justice could begin. 1 year later, there were no heart monitors cutting through the air like knives. There was only the laughter of 3 toddlers tumbling through the grass between the Jabuticaba trees. I was arranging a 3-tiered cake on a garden table, an absurdly large cake for 3 babies barely celebrating their first birthday. Samuel insisted that it was not simply a birthday. It was the first anniversary of their real lives. I no longer wore the plain white uniform of a servant. My dress was comfortable, elegant, and practical. My hands no longer smelled of disinfectant. They smelled of vanilla, fruit, and children's sunscreen. Careful with that stick. Samuel called from the lawn. I turned toward him. He no longer needed crutches, although a slight limp remained. It gave him a strangely distinguished air and served as a permanent reminder of what he had endured. He sat in the grass surrounded by 3 tiny troublemakers. Charlie crawled at full speed after the dog we had adopted from a shelter. Matthew was trying to stand by gripping his father's trouser leg. Luke, the calmest of the 3, sat on Samuel's lap chewing a rubber toy. Henry Blackwood and Arthur Whitaker sat on the veranda drinking lemonade and arguing about politics like 2 proud grandfathers. Peter, now the estate's head of household services, stood near the grill with a smile stretching from ear to ear. Time to eat. I called, carrying a tray of fruit toward the lawn. Samuel looked up. Sunlight crossed his face and erased the shadow of the dying man I had discovered behind the wall. "Mom says it's time to eat," he told the babies as he lifted Luke into the air. The word Mom still made my heart jump. Samuel and I had not rushed to define our relationship in romantic terms. We were moving slowly, very slowly. First, we had needed to heal. But in every way that truly mattered, we had already become a family. I sat beside him on the grass. Samuel placed Luke down and leaned closer, lowering his voice so the older men on the veranda could not hear. "A letter arrived today," he said. For a moment, his expression became serious. "From the court." A chill moved through me. "About Eleanor?" "Yes." Samuel took my hand. "There was a fight in the prison yard. She tried to bribe another inmate with promises of money she no longer has. Let's just say it ended badly for her. She is in the infirmary and will remain there for some time. Alone." I looked toward the horizon, where the sun was lowering behind the hills. I thought of a woman who had possessed everything and lost it all because greed had devoured her. I thought of justice, how it sometimes arrived late, but arrived nonetheless. "May God forgive her," I said quietly. "I'm too busy being happy to spend my life hating her." Samuel smiled and kissed the back of my hand. "I'll drink to that." At that moment, Charlie managed to pull himself upright. Swaying dangerously, he took his first 2 unsupported steps toward me. He laughed, revealing 2 new teeth, and fell into my arms. He walked. Samuel shouted, "Did you see that?" I saw. I held the child against me and felt his warmth, his life, and all the years waiting ahead of him. He walked toward us. Above the garden, the branches of the jabuticaba trees moved gently in the evening air. From a distance, the scene looked almost impossibly peaceful. 1 man, 1 woman, and 3 children at the center of a garden brought back to life by love. The white mansion stood behind us, no longer an icy palace, but a refuge. Samuel once told me that before the accident, he had believed money could buy everything. He believed his life had ended when the car went over the cliff. Instead, he had been forced to lose everything. He had been reduced to something people treated like garbage before he discovered the only treasures that had ever been worth protecting. Sometimes angels do not have wings. Sometimes they wear yellow rubber gloves and carry courage forged from steel. The end. If this story touched your heart, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from and what kind of stories you would like to hear next. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful, high-quality stories. Until the next story of courage, survival, and love.